Okay. So that means we have to find two numbers that multiply to equal 12, and those same two numbers add to equal your b, which is negative 13. Okay. So for this one, negative 12 and negative 1 works. So negative 12 times negative 1 is positive 12, and negative 12 plus negative 1 is negative 13. Okay. So now we just replace our negative 13x. Okay, so that gives us negative 2x times 4x squared minus 12x. And even if you wanted to, if you switch them around, it'd still give you the same answer. I'll go ahead and switch them around just to mix things up a bit. So negative 1x minus 12x plus 3 equals 0. Okay. So now we do factor by grouping. Okay, we get these two and these two. Okay, so we have negative 2x. With these two, you can actually factor out a x. That's really it. And that leaves you with 4x minus 1. And these two, you can factor out a negative 3, which leaves you with 4x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, so we have our common binomial. So that leaves us with negative 2x. Factor that 4x minus 1 out. And whatever is left goes into the other parentheses, which is x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, so we have it factored out. So now we just set each of them to 0. Okay, so that means negative 2x can equal 0, or 4x minus 1 can equal 0, or x minus 3 can equal 0. Bring that up a little bit. Okay, so if we divide both sides by negative 2, that just gives us x equals 0 over 2, well, 0 over negative 2, which is just 0. Here, if we add 1 to both sides, that cancels out, so that gives us 4x equals 1. Divide both sides by 4. X equals 1/4. And here, add 3 to both sides. It gives us x equals 3. Okay, so hopefully this looks familiar and all the steps are coming back to you. Okay, any questions on this one? All right. Still writing. Leave that up for a few more seconds. All right. Okay, so now they're going to really do somewhat the same thing, but they're going to try and trip you up a little bit with the wording. So I'll give you a few examples of how they'll do that. Let's say for the function f of x equals 18x squared plus 15x minus 10. Use f of x equals 15 to find 2 points that lie on the graph. Of the function. Okay. So really what that's saying is you want to find 2 x values on that graph and then plug those in and you'll have 2 points. Okay. So we know that f of x is equal to 18x squared plus 15x minus 10, and that f of x equals 15. So just replace f of x with 15, and it kind of combines the two. Okay, so that gives us 18x squared plus 15x minus 10 equals 15. All right. So from there, you just remember you want it to equal 0, so you can start your factoring. Oops, bless you.
Thank you.
So you want to make it equal 0. So you subtract 15 from both sides, which that just disappears. Okay, so that gives us 18x squared plus 15x minus 25 equals 0. And this falls under one of those cases where you really wish you could simplify it, but unfortunately you can't because there's nothing you can factor out of all 3 terms. So you have to use the A times C method with those really big numbers. Okay, so use the A times C method. Okay, so here A is equal to 18, B is equal to 15, and C is equal to negative 25. So just to make a little side note, A times C is 18 times negative 25, which is negative 450. Okay. So we have to find 2 numbers that multiply to equal negative 450, and those same 2 numbers have to add to equal your B, which is 15. And with a little bit of trial and error, you actually can end up with 30 and 15. Well, 30 and negative 15. Sorry about that. Okay. So now you're going to replace your 15x. Okay, so you have 18x squared Instead of 15x, we're going to make that plus 30x minus 15x minus 25 equals 0. And once you do that, you start with your factor by grouping. Okay, so you take those 4 terms and you make them 2 smaller terms. Okay, so you can actually factor a 6x out of those 2. Okay, so 6x times 3x would give us our 18x squared. And 6x times 5 would give us our 30x. Okay, so for these two, you can factor out a negative 5. Okay, negative 5 times 3x would give us our 15x. And negative 5 times positive 5 give us our negative 25. And once again, we have our common binomial. Okay, so we go ahead and just factor that out. So you have 3x plus 5. Uh-oh, not minus, should be times. Go ahead and cross those out. And what's left goes in the next parentheses. 6x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, so I'm just going to move it to the right. That means 3x plus 5 can equal 0. Or 6x minus 5 can equal 0. Okay, so if we subtract 5 from both sides and divide by 3, we have x equal negative 5 over 3. If we add 5 to both sides and divide by 6, we have x equals 5 over 6, which is about 75% of our complete answer. Because we factored, but remember, they wanted us to find 2 points that lie on the graph. Okay, so we have our 2x values, which means now if we plug those in, we'll have our 2y values. So we'll have our 2 points on the graph. So plug into f of x. Okay, so that means f of negative 5 over 3 is going to equal 18 times 5 over 3 squared plus 15 times 5 over 3 minus 10. I'll kind of separate that a little bit, and hopefully I'll be able to finish it all in one. Okay, so that's going to equal 18 times 5 over 3 squared is just 5 over 3 times 5 over 3, which is 25 over 9, plus, you can make that 15 times 5 if you want to, minus 10. Move that up a little bit. Okay, so you can simplify the 9 and 8. Yes?
Shouldn't it be 15 times negative 5 over 3?
Nope, negative 5, yep. So, actually, this will still become positive, but yep, this one should be negative. Thank you. Yep. Make that a little, there we go. And make that negative. All right. So now the 9 and the 18 cancels out. 9 goes into 9 one time. 9 goes into 18 twice. So you actually end up with 50 And 3 goes into 15. 3 times. Nope, 5 times, sorry about that. 5 times negative 5, now I'm getting tongue-tied. Negative 25 minus 10. Okay, so that will equal 15. Yeah, 15. So f of negative 5 over 3 is equal to 15. Okay, so now we do the same thing with 5 over 6. F of 5 over 6 is equal to 18 times 5 over 6 squared plus 15 times 5 over 6 minus 10. Okay, which will equal 18 times 5 over 6 times 5 over 6 is 25 over 36 plus 5 times, you can make that 15 times 5 over 6 if you wanted to. Minus 10. Okay, the 18 and the 36 will cancel out. 18 goes in 18 once, 18 goes into 36 twice. So you end up with 25 over 2. Plus, you can actually divide both of those by 3. So you end up with 3 over 2, so you have 15 over 2. Nope. 25 over 2, sorry about that. Minus 10. Where you can make that 20 over 2 if you wanted to. Just to get like denominators. All right, so 25 and 25 is 50, minus 20 is 30. 30 divided by 2 is 15. So we have f of 5 over 6 equals 15. So let me close that door up. Okay, so that actually gives us our 2 points. We have negative 5 over 3, 15, and 5 over 6, 15. Uh-oh. Okay, so these are our 2 points. Okay, any questions on that one? Yes.
So we started with f of x equals 15. So was it just with this one that they all equal 15, or by the end will it always equal whatever that?
Oh no, that was just pure coincidence. Okay. Yeah. I had a feeling that question would come up because it was just, like I said, it just happens that it equals 15. Oh, you mean, hold on, I think I'm misunderstanding which part. You mean for both of these equaling 15? Or for this equaling 15?
Like, is it a coincidence that we use f of x equals 15 at the very start, and then by the very end that they equals 15?
Oh, for that? Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Oh, yeah, for that one, because we actually solved for it to equal 15. So, yep, it will equal whatever we start with up here. Okay, I'm glad I did ask because I misunderstood your question. Good. Yes.
So, because we started with f of x equals 15,
Mm-hmm.
when we plug in the two x values, it will always equal 15?
Well, it depends on, if we started off with 16, it would always be 16.
So
Yeah.
do we technically need to do the plugging in if we already know what f of x equals?
This part is more of a check, and it's one of those things where, like with most checks, you don't have to do it, but
Okay.
you can catch a lot of your work if you do. But if you want to just save a couple of minutes, you don't have to do it.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Any other questions on that one? Okay, so this part I'll put optional but recommended. Like, so you don't have to, but it helps to catch mistakes. All right. Any other questions on that one? All right. Oh, anyone's still writing? All right. Okay. Okay, just a quick reminder of your intercepts. Okay. So if you want to find your x-intercept, you make your y equal 0. Which is the same as saying f of x equals 0. To find your y-intercept, you make your x equal 0. Or you can just make it f of 0 if you wanted to. Which, same thing. All right, so let's say, for example, say solve and find the x-intercepts for f of x equals 12x squared minus 11x plus 2. Okay. So since we already know that when you're looking for the x-intercept, that means you make y equals 0, or f of x equals 0. That means we want to solve for 12x squared minus 11x plus 2 equals 0. Okay. So again, unfortunately, we can't factor out anything to make those numbers smaller. So we just have to use the A times C method. Where our A is equal to 12. Our B is equal to negative 11. Let me clean up that 12 a little bit. And our C is equal to 2. So our A times C is equal to 12 times 2, which is 24. So we have to find two numbers that multiply to equal our 24. And those same two numbers have to add to equal negative 11. Yes? Yep, negative 8 and negative 3. So you have negative 8 times negative 3 is positive 24. And negative 8 plus negative 3 is positive, is negative 11. Okay, so once we have that, we're going to replace negative 11x. Bring that, there we go. So that will give us 12x squared minus 8x minus 3x plus 2 equals 0. Okay, now we're going to do our factor by grouping. Which means we take the 4 terms and make them 2 smaller terms. Yep, 2 smaller terms. Okay, so these 2 terms we can factor out of 4x. And that leaves us with 3x minus 2. And again, if you want to double check to make sure your factoring was right, you can just distribute. These 2, you can factor out a negative 1, which would leave you with a 3x minus 2 equals 0. Okay, so you have your common binomial, which again is what you're looking for. So you factor that out. So you have 3x minus 2. And you can cross those out if you want to. And what's left goes into the next parentheses equals 0. Okay, so that means that 3x minus 2 can equal 0. We'll clean that up some. Or 4x minus 1 can equal 0. So if we add 2 on both sides and then divide by 3, x equals 2 over 3. Or if we add 1 to both sides and divide by 4, x equals 1/4. Okay. Now those are your x values, they aren't your intercepts. Your actual intercepts, since f of x equals 0, or in this case y equals 0, your actual intercepts 2 over 3, 0, and 1/4, 0. These are actual x-intercepts. These are just the values of x where y is equal to 0. All right, any questions on that one? All right, I'll leave that up for a few seconds. Okay. Now the easier of the two are the y-intercepts. Okay, so let's say we want to find the y-intercept. Bless you. For, say, f of x equals 25x squared minus 49. Oops, straighten that up a little bit. Oh, might as well stop it and restart.